Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicholas J. Orcutt with the Fractured Line. How is everyone doing tonight? It's been a week, hasn't it? These kids being home, man. These kids are just driving me nuts. I got out of work on Friday morning. I did that 24. Got out of work Friday morning. It's the 4th of July. 4th of July weekend was just busy for EMS. And it's just been nonstop between the kids and work and everything. So I'm exhausted. I'm sure all of you are exhausted too. So I apologize for the bags under my eyes. I got the great bags under my eyes today. I also apologize if I'm losing my voice. Like I said, the kids have been home, which means that I've just been losing my voice, telling them to cut the shit out. And so I figured today, with the recent article I did about Mitch McConnell and CPR, I figured today would be a good time for us all just to kind of go over a couple of the different things that were in that article, right? Look at some of the different aspects of not so much what happens with CPR, but more so what happens after CPR. I'm going to try to show a little bit of a video. I do want to preface this before I show anything. The video I found, it's somewhere in London maybe, but somewhere in Europe. And it's done through the eyes of a medic. And I can tell you just from the equipment they're using that this is probably about a 10-year-old video. But it is graphic. It shows CPR actually in progress happening. So I do want to preface everybody right now. It's graphic. It's if you haven't seen CPR done in person, it's hard to watch. And the reason I want to go over this with people is I can't express to people enough how violent and dangerous CPR is. With that being said, I am not saying not to get CPR. There are a lot of people who can survive CPR, and it absolutely saves lives. I've personally saved people's lives using CPR. And I think a lot of people read the article I did the other day and got the wrong impression. I am in no way advocating not to have CPR done. It is just important that people understand that there is CPR that can happen for a viable outcome and CPR that can happen for a non-viable outcome. And it is super, super important to understand the difference. And it's also super important to understand that there are so many other underlying factors of it. Age can play a role, previous health, what medications you're on. There's so many different aspects that can play a role. This is including what your medical history is, or how long were you down? How long was the person down? Anything over 4 minutes, you're going to start talking about brain damage. So it's important to know. I am not advocating not to get CPR done. If you are of an age where it is viable to keep you alive, it will keep you alive. It is very good at what it does. Some of you were here when I talked about the 15-year-old kid that I saved doing CPR. There was another kid that me and my since past partner saved who was on a football field. And he had the same thing that Damar Hamlin from the Bills had, where he got hit in the chest and his heart stopped. And CPR was able to save him. We were able to get him back. So CPR absolutely saves lives. I just want to make sure people are aware. It does save lives. I am never, ever going to advocate not to have CPR done unless it's at a point where it's going to cause more harm than good. So, as I said, I have this video. It is paramedics doing CPR. See if I can get it to work properly. Because, again, I am not a computer person. And so I've started this video a little bit more than near the end of it, mainly because the beginning of it is very dated. It does show the old style of equipment we had, the old Life Pack 12s that had the paddles. It's very dated on some of that stuff. But what's important is there's a lot of it that's not. And a lot of it is still super Bible, and especially this. So again, if you're squeamish, if you have a hard time seeing this kind of stuff, feel free to turn away now. But as you can see, they're actively doing compressions on somebody. Uh, it's exhausting when you have to do compressions. I know a lot of people were saying we have a mechanical thumper, things like that. That's great if you have it. A lot of us don't. I didn't for the longest point in my career, um, but it is exhausting. If you can't tell, I can tell you just by looking at the chest is already broken. Uh, it's very unpleasant. It's a very unpleasant experience, but it's also, it will seem to you in the moment of doing it that you're doing it forever, when in truth it's not going that way. Now, the fact that they've stopped doing CPR, I can tell you, because they got back in some way. That's the vent in his mouth. Uh, Rather than these places, they have a vent in their ambulance post intubation. Uh, the majority of places you'll find in the United States don't have that kind of equipment. We don't have that kind of equipment. But what I wanted you to take away from that is I wanted you to see the force and how violent it really is when compressions are done. It's not it's, I'm sorry if it's hard to hear me. I'll speak up. Is that better? Compressions are violent and they hurt. They absolutely make a difference and they save lives. But it's very important to understand that they are violent. I'm just making sure that my microphone is working properly. And I'll raise the sound a little bit here. I'm not a computer guy. So when I have things technically done like that, I struggle a little bit with it. I also had my paperwork set aside here somewhere. And now I'm not going to be able to find my paperwork that I set aside, and that's going to suck. Okay. Perfect. So I wanted to talk a couple reasons why so I wanted to talk about why they would have kept Mitch McConnell alive in the first place. I mean, aside from the fact that, he regardless how we feel about him, he does have a family. I'm pretty sure most of his family aren't all Neanderthals. I'm sure a couple of them are because of how old he is. That when he would have had children, it would have been, like Mitch McConnell's old enough that when God said, "Let there be light," he's the one that flipped on the switch. So I can't say for sure that he doesn't have a family or that his family's not there. But it is very difficult to say to a family member that, yeah, we're going to let him go. I've done it. Anybody who hasn't done it, it's a very difficult situation. When we made the agreement, like my grandmother was my yaya, she was like my mom. And when we made the agreement to let her go, it was a discussion and it was what she wanted. And we respected her wishes on it. But it's one of those kind of things that stays with you. You're making the active decision to let that family member go, right? And that's a very difficult thing to do. And so I wanted to look at a couple of different aspects of the Mitch McConnell story. First one, and I've heard this go around by a lot of people that they're saying, oh, they're keeping him alive because the governor gets to replace him when he dies. That used to be true, and it's not anymore. In 2011, no, 2021, 2021 or 24, the Kentucky Senate passed a unanimous bill saying the governor can pick, but they can only pick from a select number of candidates that the Senate votes for them to pick for. So the Republican-controlled Senate in Kentucky is still going to be able to hand 3 candidates that are going to be Republican to the Democratic governor and say, all right, pick one to replace Mitch. The problem is, the timing's really difficult for if you're politically involved, right? This is this close to a major election and having to replace somebody like McConnell, who has been around long enough that I'm pretty sure he helped the founding fathers carry the wood for the actual Senate building. It's it's a difficult thing to then add on to. You're already trying to get people not to vote MAGA, right? McConnell has been a staple of the Republican Party. He has been the Republican Party. Until Donald Trump, it was Mitch McConnell's party. And so there's a optics problem with that, right? Because you're trying to have people vote Republican, but all the people that are anti-MAGA that are still Republican, you're having them replace the one guy that they would have believed in. And in all fairness, he is the founder of the Republican Party. Um, he founded it. He founded it after high school. Yeah, but he was in office 42 years, right? That is a lot of harm he has caused in office. That being said, 42 years is a legacy nonetheless. The Republicans. So it's funny, right? The Republicans always call the Democrats the snowflakes. Democrats are the snowflakes. We're the snowflakes because we absolutely think that, we think that, everybody deserves to be on the same playing field. We're the snowflakes because we think that, equal rights is cool. We're the snowflakes because we don't want to be bootlickers to the rich and powerful. I don't know, but we're the snowflakes. That being said, you find me a single Democrat out there right now who wouldn't throw a party when Chuck Schumer is gone, and I will show you a Republican. That man, the Democrats are absolutely fine with saying, all right, out with the old and with the new. The Republicans are not that way, and they will cling to the past as much as they can. And there's nobody that embodies the past better than Mitch McConnell. He is the past. He is quite literally the past. There's financial aspects of it too. His staff is like, here's what's crazy, right? His staff are still getting paid right now to keep him propped up like Weekend at Bernie's. For months now, and I'm sure we've all seen it. And there have been 2 neurologists that have come out and talked about it. He's had, absent seizures. So there's different types of seizures, right? There's grand mal seizures, and those are the all over body, uncontrollable convulsions. And then there are absent seizures. And absent seizures are kind of the same thing, but it's on a smaller scale. In your brain, it's not a smaller scale, but it's a smaller scale for your body. And so it's kind of like neurons misfiring in your brain and you just shut down. You'll go catatonic, or like you might have like an eye twitch or something. Overall, most people who wouldn't know it wouldn't notice. There has absolutely been video of McConnell having seizures on camera while talking to reporters. His staff has covered it up, and they've done a very poor job covering it up because we've all seen it. And so his staff, and I would be really interested to know what's going to happen to his staff once he's gone, because they have been literally parading a dead man around now for probably 2 years. The only difference is now they actually have a real report that he's dead. It's aside from them trying to be, what was that movie? Death Becomes Her, back in the day when Susan Sarandon, when they duct tape their arms to get on to make them stay there. Aside from that, they're not going to really be able to hide Mitch McConnell's situation. But if you're a part of the Republican Party right now, the last thing you want is Mitch McConnell going, because he's a huge, huge benefactor to the PACs, all the super PACs. He brings in so much money because he just tells them straight up, I'm going to have my guys do what you want them to do. And again, a lot of that has changed since Trump has taken over. Now it's less about we'll have our guys do what you tell them to do and more, well, whatever Donald Trump decides to do at the moment, that's what we'll do. But there's absolutely been just a growing part of the Mitch McConnell situation that's just it's going to go as far as where all of us thought it was, where all of us are like, I hate this guy. This guy sucks. It's going to end up turning into a situation where I hate this guy to now I feel bad. Just let this dude die. You guys are just being cruel. It's worth noting, I actually have a couple stats on post-ROSC care, so when I say post-ROSC, what ROSC is return to spontaneous circulation. So when we do CPR, when we're doing CPR because somebody doesn't have a pulse or somebody doesn't, they die. Successfully doing CPR will get you a ROSC. Hopefully, that is your end goal, is to get ROSC. That means the heart's going to do its own thing. It's going to need support because we've fucked up your body now a whole bunch because we had to bring it back to life. But it's important to know. It's important to know the stats that come with it because ROSC is not the get out of jail card that people think it is, right? So it's not just because we got you back doesn't mean you're going to ever be back. So under 10% survive a hospital discharge. So that means 90% of people who survive a cardiac arrest die in the hospital after surviving a cardiac arrest. And that's typically healthy people. McConnell is not a healthy person. In the hospital, like the in-hospital best case setting is still only a 20 to 25% chance leave alive. In elderly out of hospital survival craters, the 30-day survival is about 4.4 between the ages of 80 and 89. Mitch McConnell was 80 and 89, probably 80 and 89 years ago. So he's not getting out of the hospital. There's been a lot of staffers who are, he's improving. He's improving. He's not. He's not improving. It's just the machines are having an easier time keeping him alive. And it's genuinely sad. It really, really, really is sad. I will keep everybody up to date on if there's any new news stories about it. As I looked, and I actually looked moments before starting the live today, and there's still nothing new about it. But I will keep everybody up to date on that one. I did also want to update everybody on Paige Lim and her issues going on with ICE. I talked to her somewhat regularly. She had a media blitz storm where she was all over. I still like to brag that, the fractured line was the very first one to get her on the air. I got to break the first interview with her. So suck it, ABC. But it's a win for independent media, right? It's a win for independent journalism. The independent journalism actually got to break something before the mainstream. But ICE actually came out and they released a statement on her and about this situation. And the statement they released was just insane. They said that they went after her because she doxed an agent by giving away his home information, his home address. And, live on here, I showed everybody the post she put up that just said, this is Jonathan Ross, the one who killed Renee Good. There was no, that was it. It had his name. And for what it's worth, Jonathan Ross is a very common name. It's like Steve Smith, right? But ICE came out and said that she doxed him by putting out his personal information and his address. And they actually said that she released his address. So now, without giving out too much of everything going on, I know there's been a lot of legal talk and everything because she's trying to fight back against it. And a lot of people have told her, well, just wait, see if they charge you with anything. The problem with doing that is if she waits until they charge her with anything, then that means they've had enough time to build a case against her and she's already without a paddle at that point. You can't just hope for the best in these situations. You have to make the best happen. And that's what she's actively trying to do. But like I said, I've stayed in touch. She's big on TikTok and Instagram. I don't know Instagram at all. I am the oldest 40-year-old you'll ever meet. I don't know social media very well. But she's doing well. There was another he was a Rochester native, which is about 40 minutes outside of Syracuse. And I showed up to his house and he wasn't home. So then they showed up to the hotel he was at. And I reached out to him, but he wants to stay quiet. He's afraid of the attention that comes with it. And from the attacks that Pagelin has gotten, about everything she's been going through with ICE, I understand why he would want to remain anonymous. The attacks that she's been getting, like I looked today, and it's when I say she's getting attacked, it is innocuous things that she'll post something on her Facebook and she'll post it and it will just be, I had a good day today or something to that extent. And all of a sudden there are people just destroying her. And I don't know why she hasn't made it private yet, but like at the same time, like it's sad to say like, oh, well, you should just make your thing private. But why? Why should she have to? She's a normal person who's sharing normal things. And before all this happened, she did her TikToks and all that, and that was what she liked to do. And the fact that there are still people posting about how much they hate her and all this stuff, and like if you didn't like it, then why'd you attack ICE and all this stuff? It's like, well, she didn't. It's sad that we are in that situation in this country where people are going to throw other Americans under the bus because of tribalism. And somebody like Paige she's not somebody who deserves that, right? I mean, nobody does. I'm intentionally not using the other guy's name out of respect for him. I will say I know it's out there because a couple different sources reported on it. But I'm not going to say his name. And he's a father. And I can't imagine having that storm come down on you while raising your kids. I've had conversations already with my wife that, she's concerned because I put myself in this position. I'm very outspoken. I'm very loud. And she's concerned, with me doing this, that it puts her and my kids in a position where something could happen negatively because of ICE getting upset, ICE getting mad. There's no level with them where they don't not find it worth their time. They love to do it. They love to intimidate. They love to tear down people. And so we've had that conversation. I've said to her, I understand your fear. We actually even talked about it today because she said, we were talking about her dad who passed. And I'd said, your dad would have enjoyed my writing. Oh, he would have been terrified and told me not to do it though, because it puts too much of a target on us. And she's like, yeah, she goes, I worry about the same thing. And so I understand why somebody might not want to have that target on them. And so out of respect for him, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to use his name. But we're at a level where regular Americans, where they're coming after people for Facebook posts. And let's be clear here, right? There's always been a level where if you post something online, you are held accountable for it. If you make threats, things like that, you're held accountable. Your words, your memes matter. You can't just spew bullshit and hope for the best. you still have the right to say it. You still have the right not to be harassed by the government for saying it. When federal agents are showing up because you posted a meme, we have crossed a place that we should never have been. This officially crosses the line. And the fact that there's not more outrage over this, the fact that we don't have people screaming at the top of their lungs about this, boggles my mind. Absolutely boggles my mind. It genuinely upsets me. It really does. It genuinely upsets me. You know, I grew up like most of you, Pledge of Allegiance every morning. Back in the day, I was kind of an asshole kid. And so I would intentionally refuse to stand up for the pledge. And ironically enough, there are a lot of people that I went to school with who stood up for the pledge and who would say the pledge every day, who now just shit over everything that they said in that pledge. That liberty and justice for all, that matters, right? That matters. It's not just that wasn't just a one-off. We didn't just decide, hey, why not, right? That actually matters to some of us. We lost friends, family members, I don't get it. And it really, so I struggle with this, right? I struggle with this a lot because I've personally cut family members out of my life who are so far MAGA. I have a cousin who thinks that Jeffrey Epstein is still alive because he's immortal and he was Thomas Jefferson. He told my family that there was a date in August where gravity will be turned off for 8 seconds. There's people in my own family that I've had to cut off because of the insanity. And there used to be a time when we could argue about things and we could disagree with things, like we could disagree with guns, right? We could say the Second Amendment isn't designed to have an AR-15 with a bump stock. We can disagree and say that, the Second Amendment isn't designed for you to have this weapon, that weapon. You don't need 5.56 for hunting. That was we could disagree with that. I could disagree with somebody on something like that and then still go out and have a beer with them. I could disagree with somebody even, so I grew up Greek Orthodox, with my grandmother. And on my dad's side, I was somewhat estranged from my dad's family, but his mom was fresh off, her grandparents or her parents were from Ireland, and she was a devout Irish Catholic. And she thought that the biggest danger in the world was abortions. Like she, if you had asked her, there were roving bands of Democrats just doing abortions to people as they were walking down the street. And yet she could sit down and have a conversation with someone and have completely opposing political views and still share a meal with them. I don't know when I know when that changed, but I don't know how to get back from that, they say it's the Trump derangement syndrome, which, on a side note, it's Trump derangement syndrome. The guy who came up with the phrase, I think he was a Wisconsin senator, governor. He just got convicted of child porn. So first and foremost, fuck that guy. But the whole Trump derangement syndrome, it's not that we want to talk about this. Most of us don't want to deal with this. I would have been happy staying writing about the EMS stuff. I just couldn't anymore because there's too much. There's too much. I have children. More than anything, like I professionally work to heal people. I want people alive and doing well. I have children that I need to leave a world to. I have a wife and a daughter. I am personally invested in making sure both of them maintain their rights. The Handmaid's Tale was not a fantasy good time to me. That is a terrifying look at where we could be heading. And so I don't understand how there are people who are so adamant that they're willing to ignore humanity and ignore the people in their lives to support a man that doesn't care about them and that will never know them, will intentionally never talk to them. It's I know the other day I put up the article on transgender, the transgender rights and transgenders in sports. And I knew that it was going to be divisive. I actually had reached out to another writer friend of mine who'd been on here before, Monica, and I told her, I know this is going to rub people the wrong way, but I have to do it. I have to. There are going to be people in my own camp, my own team. There are going to be people in the fractured line family who are going to agree with the ruling from the Supreme Court, and I have to do this in a way that they understand that I'm not attacking them, because nowadays every attack on a belief system is very different, and it is very much. So it's okay to have opposing beliefs. It's okay to view things differently. Like one of the things with like the transgender issues, and this is one of I can't remember what somebody had commented about the IOC, saying that the IOC had said that the IOC didn't allow trans men and women to compete, and you're not wrong. It is highly contested. The IOC also have refused people who are born genetically different. There was the runner who was born with a higher testosterone level than women are, and they kept wanting to test her and make her take hormone suppressants. She was a natural born woman. That is just how she was made. It's how God made her. And it seems wrong to try to force that because it doesn't fit the standard of what they say a woman is, right? But my biggest point with all of that isn't even so much that taking the transgender people out of sports or telling trans people they can't play sports. My absolute problem with it, my biggest problem with the entire part is that we shouldn't be governing it. The moment we start governing who can and can't do things, we govern for all of us. So the moment the Supreme Court says, yeah, they're not allowed to do this, and I acknowledge they didn't ban them, they approved the ban, which semantics, but it matters down the road, hopefully. But the moment that we start making laws preventing certain people from doing certain things, that's a slippery slope. And if you look at the purpose of the law, it's not set to punish trans. Everybody's biggest fear is that somebody who looks like me is going to put on a wig, say I'm a woman, and now go compete in the WNBA. First off, I'd have my ass handed to me in the WNBA. Handed to me. Oh, I might outshoot Angel Reese. But I think that's about it. But I think most people feel that, it's going to be a guy like me, and I was 6'1" when I was 16. And so, I understand where the fear is to have somebody who looks like that in sports. I do. I get it. Brittany Griner was 6'7" when she was 17. She's a woman. She's a girl. 100%. 100%. Does she not qualify because she's got masculine features? That's not fair. But even beyond that, right? Like, even if you take all of that away, we are now litigating who can and can't do things. And the insidious part isn't that they're doing it because they're not litigating this because they truly believe it. The people that are in charge don't give a fuck. You think Donald Trump gives a fuck who plays in the WNBA? Do you think that he cares that Riley Gaines tied for 5th place to a trans person? He doesn't. I don't give a shit. He doesn't even know who that is. Like somebody he's probably had dinner with doesn't know what the fuck she is. They're doing it to hurt us. They're doing it to set a precedent because they're saying, if we can do this and people are quiet about this, then we can keep doing it. And I know, I before people say, I get it. I understand the fear, the hate for that, not trans, but for this is a culture problem. We shouldn't be focusing on this. It's not a culture problem anymore, though, right? Because the moment something becomes litigated, it's no longer a cultural problem. And we can't use that excuse of, well, it's just cultural. Let them have the culture side. We'll take the law. They're destroying the law, using the culture because we all said, oh, well. We all said, it's not our problem right now. That's not our concern. And they made it our concern. Same thing happened during the civil rights when people were like, let's not worry about them right now. It could be somebody else's problem. Let's just worry about trying to get our tax rates to a certain point. You know, it's a very slippery slope, and it ends up with all of us losing rights. And the scariest part, and this is like the insidious part, and I see this is me looking at it as a father. This isn't me looking at it as a guy who studies this or anything. This is me looking at it as a father. Every part of this argument, every part of like the argument about it has nothing to do with trans. It has to do with the fact that they want to control women. It's what it comes down to. They aren't complaining that trans men are playing in sports. They aren't complaining. They have no problem putting trans men back in women's sports. They are saying that women aren't able to do their own. They aren't able to. They're too weak. They're too demure. They're too passive to be able to do this themselves. They need to be protected. They need to be held. Somebody needs to hold their hand and make it easier for them. That's horseshit. That's horseshit. That's absolutely horseshit. The strongest people in my life are women. In fact, I don't drink anymore. If I did drink, it would be because of women. Because women have made my life very difficult. You know, my daughter was born. My daughter was my first child. She drives me up a fucking wall. I love her to death. Even today, she comes home. I need a new phone protector screen for my phone. She's had her phone for 2 weeks. She smashed it. I wanted to strangle her. But, you know, there's this sense and this fear of women that these guys have. And that's where this is all coming from. It's got absolutely nothing in the world to do with what they actually think needs to be done. They don't care. They don't. They really don't care they don't care who it is that is making the rules, as long as it's not women. You know, and what really drives me insane is the amount of women that are, you know, carrying water for these men, right? The amount of people who are carrying water and being the ones to tell them, you can do this in my name, or I support this. That is mind blowing to me. And no, they don't care about protecting children at all. They don't. They especially don't. And it's defeating. It really, really, really is. It's absolutely defeating. And so I understand that there's a lot of people out there who don't think that the trans issue should exist right now. I understand that there's a lot of people out there who either don't understand the trans issue or don't believe in it or think that it's, you know, kind of a losing cultural war or whatever. I get that. And I'm not saying that you don't have the right to feel that way. I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel that way. All I'm saying is I really genuinely hope that when the time comes and the trans people are the ones that we refuse to protect, that they're not the ones that we need to protect us back. Because if that day comes, they will not be there. It's those of us who have, Black friends, Black family members, we have heard them multiple times say, "You're on your own for this one." They're not joking when they say that. They want no part of the shit we're dealing with. Everything going on in Minnesota, they're like, good luck. We tried to warn you guys. You guys didn't listen. When it's two white people gunned down in the city, now you'll pay attention. This is the same thing. This is exactly the same thing. You can be opposed to it all you want, but you need to stand behind people having equal rights across the board. And even if you disagree with people having the ability to compete or, play against somebody or whatever it is, have it by all means. I am not telling you to change your mind. I'm not telling you that you need to think differently. You have your opinions on it and you have your reason for it, and that's fine. That's fine. It's okay to have your own opinion and reasoning on things. We all do. It's not okay, except pedophiles. They get no rights. I completely agree. It's not okay, though, for us to allow our opinions, likes, and beliefs to become law, because what I like isn't what you like, and what you like isn't what I like. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Thank You for Smoking. Great movie. Great movie. And there's a part where they talk about, where he talks about arguing for big tobacco. And he makes the example with his kid and says, let's argue ice cream flavors. I'll argue vanilla, you argue chocolate. And the kid argues chocolate's the best, chocolate's all this. And he goes, well, I think chocolate's good, but I think other flavors are good too. I think they're all good. And the kid goes, well, you didn't argue vanilla. He goes, I didn't have to. I just have to prove you wrong. I just have to prove that your side isn't right. That's what they're doing right now. They're trying to prove our side's not right so they can take away those rights. They want to make it so you are afraid to step against anything they do. The famous quote, they came for the Jews, I said nothing. They came for the blacks, I said nothing. They came for me and no one was left to say anything. That is true. That is happening. The trans are the first. It's not going to stop. It's not, and it's not going to get better. So you can believe and frame anything how you want. If you want trans out of sports, fine. If you don't like Black people, that's on you. If you think men are terrible, join the club. That doesn't mean that we should be having rules taking their rights away, because none of us will win that. We'll all lose that. And so with that, I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I have been Nicholas J. Orcutt. As always, I would like you all to stay loud, stay informed, and stay dangerous. Have a great night.